He told me we were just unlucky, month after month, test after test, needles, calendars. I blamed my body. I signed consent forms. I leaned over bathroom counters, whispering pep talks to hormones. Then a nurse read something off a chart that made the lights in my head turn on all at once. Your husband's vasectomy was when? I didn't answer because I didn't know he'd ever had one. I know now, and I'm going to tell you exactly how I found out, what I did next, and why the quiet kind of revenge is the most permanent kind there is. I'm Kara, 33, teacher, lover of spreadsheets and secondhand bookstores. My husband, ex-husband now, was Owen, photographer, golden retriever energy, a grin you could hang lights on. We met at a friend's rooftop potluck. He asked if I liked sour cherries. I said no, but I liked the pie he'd baked them into. He said, "Then you like me." We dated for a year and a half. We were the kind of couple that people pointed to and said, "You two make sense." From the beginning, kids were part of the conversation. We didn't pick names or nursery themes. We simply said yes, someday, absolutely. The soft kind of yes that sounds like a future. We married in a botanical garden. The photos looked edited even before he opened Lightroom. We danced under strings of lights he'd measured himself because details mattered to him, or he wanted me to think they did. Month 7 of trying, I started buying tests in bulk like a warehouse club was sponsoring my uterus. When it was negative, I told myself, next cycle. When it was negative again, I told myself, stress. When it was negative a year later, I told myself, I'm 33, not 80. Then my OBGYN said the word people use for a road that's blocked by orange cones, infertility. Nothing to panic about, she said. Let's just run the standard workup for both of you. Both of you. Owen squeezed my hand and said, whatever it takes. He brought snacks to blood draws. He kissed my temple after ultrasounds. He ordered me ginger tea in waiting rooms where the chairs are too bright and the magazines too old. He said things like, we're a team. He said things like, if it's meant to be, it'll be. He said a lot. I listened because I loved him. I listened because I wanted to believe effort was enough. The first round of labs came back. My numbers were fine, not perfect, not poetry, but fine. The doctor scheduled a hysterosalpingogram, imaging to make sure tubes are open. They were, open like tiny highways. Let's run a semen analysis for your husband, she said. Standard. Owen smiled with his mouth, not his eyes. Do we need that right away? Yes, the doctor said. It's foundational. He booked it for the following week. He canceled the morning of with a text to the clinic, caught a shoot out of town, will reschedule. The clinic forwarded me the auto-generated cancellation. The subject line said, we'll miss you, like it was a brunch. I asked at dinner, how'd the appointment go? He chewed slowly. I moved it. The studio called last minute. Okay, I said, no problem. Because I picked my battles like I pick produce, gently, trying not to bruise anything. He rescheduled again. And again. Meanwhile, my body did tricks for medicine, Clomid, letrozole, the alphabet soup. I got hot flashes that felt like someone put a space heater behind my eyes. I used ovulation strips that looked like tiny pregnancy tests sent by an optimistic doll. We had scheduled sex so romantic it could have been written by a spreadsheet. Month 14, I stopped telling friends we were trying. Month 16, I stopped telling myself I wasn't angry. We agreed on an IUI, intrauterine insemination. It's like giving gravity a ladder. It meant we needed a fresh sample from Owen the morning of. He nodded, said yes, set an alarm, put on a playlist like he was about to jog. We drove to the clinic at 7:10 a.m. on a Saturday, both of us quiet in the way people are when they're standing at the edge of a hope they don't want to spook. He went into the room labeled collection with a brown paper bag and a sense of humor about cup sizes. He came out 10 minutes later, looking like a kid who'd been told the pool is closed. They need to, thaw one of the backup vials, he said. The cup thing didn't work. I blinked. Backup vials? He coughed. You know how some people, just in case, freeze? The nurse interrupted. No problem. We'll use the file on record. The file on record. As if this clinic had known him before today. As if he'd been here before. My stomach sank like it is trained to do when something is both obvious and unthinkable. They whisked me into a room with a soft blanket and told me to scoot down. The procedure was quick and uncomfortable, a pinch and a prayer. Owen held my hand and told a story about a golden hour shoot. The nurse hummed.
I stared at a water-stained ceiling tile and tried to not think in words with sharp edges. You lie small when you're in a paper gown. You learn to make yourself patient-sized. The IUI didn't work. The next one didn't either. Next step, the doctor said gently, is IVF. You're a good candidate. I nodded like a bobblehead version of myself. Owen squeezed my shoulder in the universal gesture for, we're fine, even if we're not. We signed papers with the kind of signatures you get when your hand is a different temperature than your heart. I bought needles. We learned to mix powders with solvents like we were doing kitchen chemistry. He set reminders. He put little star stickers on the calendar on injection days because he thought silly would make it survivable. It did. A little. I told myself, he's here. He's helping. He loves you. All true statements can hide another truth that you don't want to look at directly. And then, the nurse said the sentence that lifted the floor. Pre-op appointment. A round room with a fake ficus and a doctor who carries both competence and compassion like two equal trays. We reviewed the plan. Trigger shot, retrieval timing, consent for number of eggs to attempt to fertilize, paperwork that tries to predict all the futures. The nurse, Mara, flipped open a tab chart. She read off our names, our birth dates, our insurance. Then she said, almost conversationally, since Mr. Harrow had a vasectomy in... She looked up. Sorry, do you prefer Mr. Harrow or Owen? I heard the word before. I work in a high school. I've heard everything once, but I had never heard that word applied to my husband. I'm sorry, I said carefully, like a person setting down glass. What did you just say? She checked the page again. The note indicates a vasectomy prior to storage of the frozen samples. Prior to storage? I repeated. Yes, she said. He banked samples first. That's standard. Then he had the vasectomy. The room felt like it had shrunk and I'd grown. My chair was underwater. My ears buzzed like fluorescent lights. I turned my head toward Owen. His face did a thing I'd seen once before. The day a friend asked him whether he'd shot a wedding in film or digital, and he said, mostly digital, even though it had been all digital, and he knew the friend was about to ask for negatives that didn't exist. Owen? I said. He said nothing. Then he said everything all at once. Okay, he exhaled. Okay. He rubbed his forehead. Yes, I had a vasectomy. Years ago. How many years? My voice sounded like mine, but more precise. Before we met, he said, too fast, as if speed could make honesty less sharp. But I banked, so it's not like... Mara stood up so smoothly you'd think she'd practiced leaving rooms like a ghost. I'm going to give you both a few minutes, she said, voice neutral. I'll be right outside. When the door clicked, it was the loudest sound in the world. You had a vasectomy before we met, I said, because saying it made it more real than just letting it sit between us like a fog.
Yes, he said, but I froze samples, Kara, so we could still... I held up a hand. You told me for 18 months that we were unlucky. We were, he insisted, missing the point with the enthusiasm of a man who loves the sound of a camera shutter more than the thing it's pointed at. IVF isn't guaranteed. Owen, I said softly, you let me think my body was failing. You let doctors order scans and injections and hormones. You watched me cry over negative tests. You made playlists. You said we were a team. And at no point did you tell me that you had surgically chosen not to have children before you met me. He flinched. I thought telling you would make you leave. My tongue went numb. So you decided for both of us. He reached for me. I banked samples, he repeated, as if frozen sperm were fairness. How many? I asked. 3 vials, he said. From before. And they've been used, I said. Twice. He nodded, then brightened as if he'd found a life raft. We still have one more, an IVF. I held up my hand again. He stopped. I cried once then. It was the kind of cry that doesn't spill. It stays behind your eyes, hot and stingy because your body has too much adrenaline to produce water. I wasn't crying for the loss of a narrative. I was crying for the absence of informed consent. Why? I said, one word that contains all the others. Control, fear, selfishness. He looked at his shoes. Because, he laughed, tiny, bitter. Because I didn't want kids. Silence has flavors. This one tasted metallic. Then why? I asked very quietly. Did you marry a person who did? He shrugged, the shrug that ruins lives. I thought I might change my mind. And in the meantime, I said, you let me try to change my body. He started to cry. The wrong person was crying, but tears don't care about justice. They just happen. I'm sorry, he said. He kept saying it. It was a word he leaned on like a crutch he hadn't earned. There are moments in a marriage that are decision doors. You don't always see the hinge when you walk through. This one had neon arrows. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I did not make a scene because scenes are for performers. And I was done performing. I opened the door and asked Mara to come back in. I asked for copies of the file. I asked for the name of a counselor the clinic recommends when people discover big facts in small rooms. I asked for a pause on our cycle. I asked for my coat. Owen followed me to the car, talking fast, hands flapping like he could sculpt reality. I love you, he said. I banked for you. You banked for hypothetical you, I said. You lied to me. I didn't go home. I went to my friend Ava's downtown, a studio with cement floors and plants that survive on neglect and late afternoon light. She gave me tea. I gave her silence. When your life shifts by a few degrees, you need a minute before words catch up. At 10 p.m., Owen sent an email with a subject line like a dare. What happened? He never wrote long emails. That's how I knew he was trying to look like a person who tells the truth. He met someone at 25. They got pregnant accidentally. They terminated. He spiraled into guilt, into a fear that he wasn't safe to be a father, into logic that dressed up as virtue. He scheduled a vasectomy alone. He told no one, not even his parents. He decided that if fate wanted him to have a kid later, he'd bank sperm and call it a plan rather than what it was, a hedge. He dated casually for years, and when anyone he dated said kids, he said someday. He considered that not a lie because someday is technically a time. Then he met me, and he fell in love with the part of me that organizes chaos and makes lists and holds hands at funerals and asks follow-up questions. He wanted that in his life. He also wanted the part where he'd never had to revisit the room where he'd made a choice at 25. So when I said I wanted children, he nodded. And when the tests began, he shifted schedules and bought snacks and learned vocabulary, all the while sitting on a fact so large it blocked out the sun. Please come home, the email ended. We'll talk. I responded from my phone. I will come by tomorrow to pick up some things. Then I put the phone face down and watched steam curl off my tea like a thought escaping. I slept for 90 minutes. It felt like a small mercy. Morning. Gray. Like the sky was in on it. I made a list. You can leave a life in a day if you make a list. Call the clinic's counselor. Call a lawyer a friend of a friend recommended for complicated domestic things. Log into our insurance portal and download every EOB because paper tells a story that people won't. Pack a bag, underwear, meds, 2 sweaters, passport, laptop, charger, toothbrush. Decide whether to let his family know now or later. I drove home mid-morning. Owen was at the table, elbows on wood, looking like someone had told him he was a person and he wasn't sure it was true. He stood when I came in. Kara, I held up a hand. I'm here to pack. He nodded, eyes wet. Can we... Later, I said, with a counselor or a lawyer or both. He sat back down. He watched me walk down the hall. He watched me do the kind of tidy devastation that looks like folding. My phone buzzed in the bedroom. Unknown number. I usually don't answer. I did. Is this Kara? A woman asked. Yes. This is complicated. My name is Becca. I didn't recognize the name. I found your number in a shared contact, she said, and I debated calling you for an hour, but I would want to know. Know what? I asked. She took a breath. I used to date Owen. The world steadied. Then it tilted. When? 3 years ago, she said. On and off. Nothing serious. She laughed, not happily. He told me he'd had a vasectomy. He called it responsible. He also told me later that he'd changed his mind about kids because he'd met someone who wanted a family. I had no idea that person was you or that he hadn't told you. How do you know he hadn't told me? I asked. Because he called me last night, she said, voice small. He said everything was ruined. He said you were overreacting and that he needed someone who understood context. I asked him if you knew he'd had the vasectomy before you. He said, not exactly. There are people who keep a spare version of you in their phones for emergencies. I didn't know I was one of Owen's. The emergency wasn't that I was upset. The emergency was that the world had stopped bending to his version of it. Thank you, I said to Becca. I'm sorry you were drafted into this. I'm sorry he did this to you, she said. Also, there's something else you should probably know. There is always something else when people lie for sport. He told me the reason he didn't reverse it when he met you was because he wanted to see if you'd still love him, even if biology fought you. I sat down on the edge of the bed because the floor felt farther away than usual. That's not romance, she added quickly. I think he thought it was. Thank you, I said again. You didn't have to call. I'm glad you did. We hung up. I stared at the wall. It stared back. I walked out to the kitchen. Owen looked up, hopeful in the way people are when they think a conversation will save them. Was that the clinic? He asked. No, I said. It was Becca. His face did the math, arrived at the answer, and tried to erase it. She doesn't, she's dramatic. She said you called her last night, I said. He shrugged. Just to process. You didn't call me, I said. You called an ex, and you told her I was overreacting. That's not, he started. Do not finish that sentence, I said. Do not tell me what is. He shut his mouth. Here's how this goes, I said, finally stepping into the role of narrator for my own life. I'm pausing IVF, I'm moving out, I'm speaking to a lawyer. We will decide, like adults, what to do with our joint accounts and the apartment and the one frozen vial that is not a gift, not a promise, and not a solution. It's a medical specimen. I will also be requesting access to all medical records that mention my name and copies of your prior consent forms. If you contest, we do it through attorneys. He stared at me like he didn't know me. That's the funny thing about honesty. It reintroduces you to yourself, and the people who preferred the edited version have to meet the director's cut. I love you, he said one more time, as if repetition is a bridge. I love truth more, I said, and myself most. I left. The clinic counselor, Amaya, had a couch that didn't try to swallow you and a tissue box that wasn't a trap. She used the kind of sentences that invite you to put your words on them and see if they still fit. She said, you suffered medical procedures and emotional labor under false pretenses. She said, that's betrayal, even if he believed he was protecting you. She said, there's grief here that isn't only about children. I said, I don't know if I want a child anymore. I don't trust myself to want anything that he also wants. She smiled like a person who had heard that exact sentence in other mouths. Desire doesn't disappear because someone mishandled it, she said. It hides until it feels safe. The lawyer, Ms. Chang, had eyebrows that did not move, even when I told her the punchline. She asked for timelines and documents and numbers. She asked for our lease and our prenup. We didn't have one because I trusted love to be a contract. She asked for the cryobank agreement for the remaining vial. That last one mattered, and I'm going to say this because someone listening might need it. If you are banking samples or embryos, read the contract like a villain would. Read it like someone who doesn't love you is going to use it in a room where compassion is decorative, not binding. Our contract said that use of any specimens required both parties' consent at the time of use. It also allowed either party to withdraw consent at any time, rendering the specimen unusable. It outlined options in the event of divorce. It did not grant ownership to one person as a prize for perseverance or pain. I advise, Ms. Chang said, that you send a letter to the clinic withdrawing your consent to use the remaining vial. For now, you can always change your mind, but right now, you need control over any part of this that can be controlled. I sent the letter. The clinic responded with a confirmation that felt like a seatbelt. Amaya helped me script a conversation with my parents that did not require me to perform shame. I said, we're separating. It's because he kept a major medical decision from me, not because my body failed. My mother cried softly. My father asked if I needed money. Both loved me better than they had when I was 15 and dramatic over prom. There are small mercies in every era. Owen sent flowers to Ava's apartment with a card that quoted our wedding vows, the part about patience. Ava put the flowers in the hallway with a post-it, wrong address. Try honesty. I love my friends. He also sent a longer email. He said he'd scheduled therapy for himself. He said he'd tell his parents. He said he didn't want to contest anything. He asked once if we could meet at the botanical garden where we married. I said no. The past is not a courtroom. I had one more appointment with our fertility doctor by myself. She didn't apologize for the nurse's slip. She didn't need to. I wasn't there for an apology. I was there for a post-mortem and a seed of the future. Your labs are good, she said, clinical and kind. If and when you want to try again with a partner or on your own, you are a strong candidate. She paused. But there is no timeline for grief. There is no moral award for doing this quickly. I walked out with a folder titled My Options. I put it on a shelf out of sight, not out of mind. Nothing this big goes out of mind, but out of reach. Not everything tender needs to be touched every day. Revenge is a word that conjures paint thrown on suits and Instagram exposures and dramatic speeches in echoing rooms. I wanted none of that. I wanted my life to not be haunted. So I did the kind of revenge that leaves no residue and all the consequences. I notified our insurer that all future fertility claims needed my consent. I added a note to my file about the discovery, not to shame him, but to document why there might be a sudden change. Paper protects the quiet. I requested a full accounting from the clinic of every appointment attended by his frozen specimens. Dates, volumes used, outcomes. Facts make the floor solid. I wrote a letter, not to him, to myself, listing every way I had adapted my life to a lie. Sleep schedules, diets, sex on calendars, self-talk that made it my fault. Then I wrote the opposite column, ways I would adapt my life to truth. Friendship dinners, books in bed, unscheduled Sundays. I took back the passwords, joint accounts, utilities, streaming services. Practicality is power. I told the story to exactly the number of people who keep my secrets safe and my sarcasm sharp. No more, no less. Is that revenge? Maybe it's simply recovery. But when recovery looks like someone else losing access to the places where they were careless with you, it feels like justice. A month passed. I moved into a one-bedroom that smelled like paint and possibility. The super fixed things the first time I asked. I bought a small table at a thrift shop and a kettle that boiled water fast enough to keep up with my opinions. My period came. I didn't cry. It was a body doing a thing, not a referendum on worth. I put the tampon box back in the cabinet and texted Ava about tacos. Owen sent one more message. It said, I told my parents. My mother cried. My father called me a coward. I'm sorry for the ways I made your body carry my fear. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking if I can send you the negatives from the wedding. I realized you never had them. I said yes to the negatives. They arrived in a box with careful labels and a handwritten note that simply said, you were very happy this day. I was, and that doesn't make me a fool, it makes me human. Becca texted once, months later. She said she was moving to another city and wanted to wish me well. I wished her well back. We are not friends, we are veterans of the same war. I kept going to Amaya for a while, then I didn't need to. I kept the folder on the shelf, then I took it down and opened it and didn't cry. Then I closed it again and went for a walk without my phone. People think the opposite of a lie is a truth. Sometimes the opposite of a lie is a life you don't have to explain. 6 months after the day with the phrase "the file on record," I sat on my balcony with a sweater over my knees and a lemon spritzer sweating on the little thrifted table. A neighbor watered a plant and sang off-key. A kid in the courtyard practiced cartwheels. The world did what it does when you stop asking it to be a metaphor. I had coffee with someone I met at a volunteer thing. He was kind and asked good questions and didn't try to audition for my future. We talked about books. We talked about how the city smells like toast at 7 a.m. if you walk down the right street. We did not talk about children. We did not talk about surgeries. We did not trade trauma like baseball cards. We laughed. Later that week, I went back to the botanical garden alone. Not because Owen asked, but because I wanted to. The lights were down for the season. The path by the water lilies was quiet. I stood where the arbor had been and thought about vows. I thought about how I'd kept mine. Honesty, patience, partnership. I thought about how keeping your vows to someone who broke theirs doesn't make you a fool. It makes you a person I would trust with my house keys. I sat on a bench and wrote a new vow on the back of an old grocery receipt. I will not continue stories just because I've started them. I will not accept pain just because I have already paid a lot. I will not confuse secrecy with intimacy. I will not confuse my body with a battlefield. I folded it up. I put it in my wallet. Sometimes vows are private, and that's where their power lives. There was one last thing to do, the last clean click in a series of clicks that sound like freedom. Ms. Chang sent me draft documents. I signed them. The divorce was uncontested. It read like a boring recipe: flour, water, salt, and somehow that felt right. Not dramatic, true. The clinic sent a final letter acknowledging my withdrawal of consent and the status of the remaining vial. It's not a cliffhanger, it's a period. I texted my mother a photo of a fern I'd managed to keep alive for longer than 2 weeks. She replied with 8 heart emojis and a suggestion about indirect light. Father's Day came and went. I called my dad anyway and told him a joke about cameras. He laughed. One night, I dreamed about a child. Not a specific one, a feeling. I woke up crying, the kind of tears you can catch in your mouth and taste salt. I wrote it down. I want to be a mother. I underlined I, not B-A. The sentence felt like a door that is not locked. Maybe I'll foster, maybe I'll do IVF with a donor, maybe I'll meet someone who says yes and means it, maybe I'll be the auntie who shows up with snacks and boundaries and stories about plants that struggle and then thrive. All futures are real until they aren't. All futures are impossible until they're ordinary. What I know now is this: I am not unlucky. I was lied to. Those are different universes. In one, you make offerings to fate. In the other, you make choices. If you're listening and the story in your kitchen sounds like my old life, if someone tells you you're unlucky while they hide the lever that tips the scales, trust the heat behind your eyes. Ask hard questions kindly. Ask for paper. If they call that not trusting, remember, trust isn't closing your eyes. It's keeping them open and feeling safe anyway. I still like sour cherries. I still hate the pie. I'm allowed to be complicated, and I'm allowed to be happy on a Wednesday without explaining why. If this story found you at the right time, hit like and subscribe. I post daily long-form, true-style stories about relationships, betrayal, and the quiet, satisfying power of choosing yourself. Tell me in the comments, what's a truth you gave yourself permission to see?